So this is called factoring by grouping, and this only works in certain circumstances, and I'll show you, well, I'll kind of explain when it works, but let's go through it and then I'll explain what you're looking for when you're factoring by grouping. So in this circumstance, we have an x to the third, an x squared, an x, and a constant term. And so what we're going to do is we're going to group the x to the third and x squared together, and then the x and the constant term together. When we do that, we are going to look at what is the greatest common factor in these first two terms, and that would be an x squared. You can pull out an x squared out of those. When you do that, the x to the third, since you took out two x's, now becomes just x. And the 6x squared, we took out the x squared, just becomes plus 6. On the other set of parentheses, the negative 9x minus 54, we can pull out both of these numbers, negative 9 and negative 54, are divisible by negative 9. So we can pull out a negative 9. And then basically what you're doing is you're dividing everything by negative 9. So what's left over is x. And then 54 divided by 9, well, negative 54 divided by negative 9 is positive 6. So when you're factoring by grouping, this is what when we say grouping, you group the first two terms together and the last two terms together, pull out a greatest common factor. And so what you're looking for is you're looking for this x plus 6 and x plus 6 to be the same. If they are not the same, then you cannot factor by grouping. It doesn't work then. So this is what we're looking for when we factor by grouping. And what we're going to do then is we're basically going to treat this like two different things. We've got this first thing, and then we're subtracting that 9 times the x plus 6. So we have two terms here. And we are going to take an x plus 6 out of both of those terms, factor it out. And what's left over is x squared in the first term and minus 9. So if you take this thing right here and you multiply it out, if you FOIL it out, you will get the original equation. It's the exact same thing, it's just factored. That's why it's called factoring by grouping. So once we get it factored, then what we can do is we can set each of these factors equal to 0. X plus 6 equals 0. X squared minus 9 equals 0. And then you solve them. So subtract 6 on both sides. X equals negative 6. Add 9 on both sides to the other one. We get x squared equals 9. Square root, and the square root of 9 is 3. So we'd get positive and negative 3. Remember, if you have an x to the third equation, you need to get 3 answers. And in this case, we do have 3 answers. We have negative 6, positive 3, and negative 3. What that means, if we think about the graph, is it's going to cross at negative 6, at negative 3, and at positive 3. So it's going to come up, go through negative 3, and then turn and go up through 3. So this is what the graph's going to look like. All right, so that's the first example. Let's look at one more example. If you are following along and you want to try this one, I'd encourage you to pause the video, try it on your own, and then see if you can get it, and then replay it, see if you got it right. So we're going to first start by grouping the first two terms and the last two terms. In the first two terms, we can take out a 2, because 2x cubed and 4x squared both are divisible by 2. We can also take out an x squared, so it would be 2x squared. And then what would be left over would be x plus 2. 4x squared divided by 2x squared is 2. In the other one, we can take out a negative 8. And so then what would be left over is x plus 2. So let's pretend, let's back up here and just see, I mean, what I did there was correct. But let's say you took out an 8, and then you had negative x minus 2. The reason we wouldn't do that is because this x plus 2 is not the same as negative x minus 2. Then you can't factor out, you know, the same term. So that's why we end up taking out a negative 8 and not a positive 8. So x plus 2. So So now that we have these x plus 2's the same, we can pull that out. And we get 0 equals x plus 2. And then what's left over is 2x squared minus 8. So set each of those equal to 0 to solve. We get x plus 2 equals 0. 2x squared minus 8 equals 0. Let's focus on the first one here. We subtract 2. We get x equals negative 2. That one's done. On the other one, we're going to add 8 to both sides. We get 2x squared equals 8. Divide by 2, and we get x squared equals 4. And then we square root, and we get x equals plus or minus 2. So we have 3 answers. We really only have 2 answers. Well, we really have 3 answers, but only 2 unique answers. We have a negative 2, a positive 2, and a negative 2. So what this means on the graph, I know it's going to look like this because x to the third kind of looks like an n. It crosses at negative 2 and at positive 2, but whenever you have the same root twice, so just to kind of summarize, our x's are negative 2, and positive 2. If you have the same 0 or root, sometimes we call it 2 times, it's going to go up to negative 2 and it's going to bounce right off it. So it doesn't go through it necessarily, but it does touch it on the graph. So that's what the graph's going to look like. All right, so that's it for factoring by grouping and solving.